This is Rise. Let's lock in with the goal of changing one life at a time. Yours. Together, let us rise up, inspire, strengthen, and elevate our minds. It's time to Rise on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Saran Heron, and welcome to Rise. Today we're going to be talking about self-healing after trauma with Dr. Asha Beckitt, a public speaker, host of the Self-Healing After Sexual Trauma podcast, and author of the upcoming book, Healing Stories, 8 Steps to Reclaim Your Essential Self from Sexual Trauma. She wants everyone to know that abuse does not discriminate and help survivors' healing journey. Dr. Asha has a self-heal model that she will share with us today. The self-healing model is a survivor-informed approach grounded in real-life healing journeys of sexual abuse survivors across various aspects of life, including safety, self-assessment, learning, forgiveness, health, empowerment, alignment, and unconditional love. Here today to share her story, experiences, things that help her heal, and with hope that you will be encouraged to get the right help and move forward. Dr. Asha Beckitt, welcome to Rise here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Now, you have a doctorate. So tell us a little bit about your doctorate degree for, as you know, our college students listening, other people are listening, talk about a little bit about your doctorate.
Yes, thank you so much. So my doctorate is actually in cultural anthropology. So I have PhD in that with specializations in medicine, race, gender, and social justice.
Wonderful. For those who are studying for that type of degree, what best advice would you give them in terms of studying? Who's probably like, oh my God, this is a lot. What do you want to say to them if someone is listening?
It is a lot, and it's well worth it. And study hard.
Good advice. Good advice. Study hard. You will make it, right?
You will make it at the end. Yes.
Nice.
Getting a doctorate, though, is no small feat.
I hear you. Tell me about it. Yeah. Now, what is the main purpose, why you want to share your story? Why do you want people to how do you presume that, you want to go, how did you decide that, I want to speak about this. I'm going to tell people about this.
So really what I want people to know is that you are not your trauma. So your trauma does not have to run or ruin your life. Mm-hmm. And hope and healing are possible. I know that it can be a challenging road, but once you decide to go down that road, it is actually possible. And there are not just one road to healing, there are multiple pathways. So it's about finding the things, the tools, the techniques, and what works best for you.
Agreed. It's very individual. So let's talk a little bit about trauma. And we know, there's various types of trauma. So I want us to discuss a little bit about one's trauma and how like initially, how as a person that, you've lived it, you've experienced it, how do you feel initially when this happens to you?
For me, at least, initially, there was a sense of shock. So shock that it happened, shock that I was there and that I was living through this. And it almost felt like I was detached. So psychologists call this dissociation, mm-hmm. But it was a sense of detachment, like I almost wasn't in my body anymore. Mm-hmm. And that I kind of felt like I was floating above my body, like looking at my body, but that me and my body were not the same. We were not the same being. And I was no longer in my body.
Wow, like a big disconnect. Now, mm-hmm. to heal, one must understand that it takes steps towards healing journey. And it's important for us to make clear that we're talking about your journey, because it's important to know that ignoring something, right, that has happened is not healing. So I want you to talk to our listening audience about reestablishing that safety or just taking steps toward healing. How important is that?
steps, healing and safety. One is to acknowledge the abuse. So to acknowledge that it was abuse, to acknowledge that the abuse happened. And you kind of have to get through that initial phase of feeling dissociated or feeling detached from your body, and then just acknowledging that something bad happened to you, and that it could have been, a rape or incest or something else that happened that was bad to your body. And then getting to a space where, and this typically happens, potentially months after. It's not typically done, particularly as sexual trauma is experienced, but it could be months, it could be years down the road.
Wow.
And then what happens is, after you've acknowledged that experience has happened to you, it's about creating safety. And so there's really kind of two areas of safety that you want to establish. So one is safety within yourself, because when a sexual trauma occurs in particular, and this is a little bit different than just physical abuse or emotional abuse, because sexual abuse really goes deep and just gets into every part of you and violates every part of you. So then it's about reclaiming that and being able to find that safety within yourself again. And so it's being able to feel safe within your body, feel safe within being in your body, feeling safe within being in your mind even, and the thoughts that you have, and just the experiences and touch and things that you have within your mind and body connection. And then the second part is being able to feel comfortable with others and being able to trust others again, because you feel so violated by others. So it's that trusting yourself and learning how to regain that trust and that safety within yourself, and then also being able to do that with others. And that takes time.
Right. Very, very important that you say that takes time, because a lot of time, it's just my opinion that, when you talk to people, they may feel like, oh, that was easy for her. It's not easy for me, not realizing we don't put time on anyone's healing. Now,
Right.
We're not here to recommend any therapy or what type of therapy anyone should take. But what are some various types of therapy that are available to people? Speak to me about that. And if you would like to share, your steps in terms of therapy, what worked for you.
Absolutely. So I started out a lot with talk therapy. I did talk therapy actually for 20 plus years. And that was definitely helpful for me to be able to talk through the experiences and to have somebody who was there, who was highly compassionate, and who was able to validate and empathize with my experiences. And that my therapist, I had several therapists, but one in particular really made a big difference in my life and really helped me through a lot of this. And then on top of it, I went through a period where I did what's called EMDR, which is eye movement rapid desensitization. And EMDR is a different type of therapy where it's used a lot with people who have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And it helps folks to reprocess the ideas without actually really having to talk through them a whole lot. And so that was really helpful for me, because there were aspects of it that, while I had been in talk therapy, that I just couldn't talk about. It just wasn't something I could vocalize. So to be able to do that and to have my brain really be able to heal itself through that process was incredibly powerful. I always explain EMDR like it's magic, and it is magic. I really don't know how to explain the science behind it, but it is truly magic. So it's something that if folks want to investigate further, I highly encourage you to do that. And then there's also somatic therapies, and those are body-based practices. And that's also incredibly helpful with helping you to reconnect your mind with your body. And that's something that I couldn't tolerate it prior to doing the EMDR. But I was able to tolerate it after doing the EMDR. And through that, I was able to actually really connect my mind with my body again and feel present in the moment and feel present in my body again, which was amazing because I never thought that I would feel present in my body again.
Wow, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Now you have a self-healing model. I want you to share with our listening audience, explain a little bit about that and how it worked, when you say self-healing model, which is what you did really, but explain your model.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So my whole process is I actually am a researcher and have been a researcher for over trauma, and I have researched ways in which people have experienced trauma and have interviewed people and have been able to document their processes and their healing practices through different types of traumas. And so what has inspired me through that process was to then do that with healing from sexual traumas. And because of my own personal experiences, I wanted to document other people's healing processes. And out of that emerged this self-healing framework. And so what this is really taking the practices of survivors. So it is completely 100% survivor based. It is not informed by clinicians or any kind of mental health care practitioners. It is a 100% survivor based model. And it really highlights the real healing journeys of sexual abuse survivors. And it guides you through a healing process based off of what other survivors have lived through and experienced.
Interesting, very interesting. You are listening to Rise and WHPC 90.3. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking with Dr. Asha, who's a public speaker, host of the Self-Healing After Sexual Trauma podcast, and author of the upcoming book, Healing Stories, 8 Steps to Reclaim Your Essential Self from Sexual Trauma. She wants everyone to know that abuse does not discriminate and help survivors' healing journey. Dr. Asha has a self-heal model that she will share with us today. And also, she's a survivor who wants to use an informed approach grounded in real life healing journeys of sexual abuse survivors across various aspects of life, including safety, self-assessment, learning, forgiveness, health, empowerment, alignment, and unconditional love. Here today to share her story, her experiences, things that helped her heal, and with the hope that you will be encouraged to get the right help and move forward. Now, Dr. Asha, as we've been talking, of course, is not our most popular or favorite, topic, but it is happening, and it's important that, we talk about it. And I applaud you for taking that big step to talk about this, to help others to get through it and overcome. And like you said, this doesn't have to be the way you live the rest of your life, but it sure is a journey that you could get to. Now, something that I found interesting when we spoke is that you mentioned about the denial state that one can go in where you don't see the abuse and you try to normalize it. Speak to us about that.
Yes. So this is really important. And abuse and even sexual abuse has become normalized to some degree. We see that now, even on the national stage, with even the upcoming election and, a particular candidate, we see how sexual abuse has become normalized, and we're not calling it out, and we're not saying that this is wrong. And that's a huge problem, that we're not saying it wrong, because then we're modeling that to other people, that it is not wrong and that it is normal. We also see this play out in culture in general. And, particularly like, Uncle Joe is handsy, and we offer all kinds of different kinds of excuses for folks for these behaviors, and these behaviors are abuse. These are not acceptable behaviors. And as a culture, what we have gotten into, unfortunately, is blaming survivors and forcing them to take on that shame and that blame, as opposed to calling out the perpetrators of that violence. And again, like I said, we're seeing this play out on a national stage right now.
Now, for those who are listening who are experiencing this trauma or who have been in the same place, same position that you've been, how did you know that you needed healing from your past trauma? What was that moment? Bring us to that moment when you realized you needed to get some help, some professional help to get yourself back to the place that you know you could be in a different mindset.
Yeah. So trauma really impacts every aspect of your life. So I got to a point in my life where I couldn't sleep. I had difficulties eating. I really felt extremely anxious when I was around other people. I was having flashbacks. I would have horrible dreams. I would sweat. And I was sick all the time. And I like chronically just felt ill all the time. And I noticed that I wanted to just be isolated and not have many friends and just not be around people. And I was really hyper vigilant. So meaning like my senses were up and I just constantly felt on guard with everyone that I was surrounded by, and just had to kind of always be looking around and checking my back. And I just never felt safe around others. And the only time that I felt any kind of safety is if I was locked in a room on my own and I had like a deadbolt. So it wasn't even just a regular lock. I mean, it had to be like a deadbolt. And I noticed that level of feeling unsafe, and then along with all of the flashbacks and things, that it was time that I got help.
Wow, that's a lot. I'm happy that you got the help that you needed. Now, for our listening audience, our students or listening audience who's going to be listening to the program, how did you finally know now that you are doing better? Did those things that you mentioned earlier, did they subside? Did they get better? Did you have better control over, your responses and how you were feeling? You weren't feeling sick anymore. Share with us a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the great things that therapy taught me was how to start regulating my own emotions. And so it taught me to be aware of when I was feeling that hypervigilance or that unguardedness, and then to find ways to cope with that. And so I would notice it, and then I would go, okay, I'm going to take some deep breaths now. I'm going to look around. I'm going to notice the flowers that are around. I actually went through this whole thing where every time I was driving, I would stop and I would notice whatever flowers were around. And that was really helpful for me, or whatever, bushes, whatever landscape was around. That became kind of ingrained. And as I started to do it, I would do it more often. And every time I would notice that, I would take some deep breaths, and that would help me to calm down. So I started to build in some of these coping mechanisms. And then after you start doing that for 2-3 weeks, it starts to get ingrained, because your brain has the ability to shift and change. We know that based off of neuroplasticity, that our brains can shift and we can learn new patterns. And so my brain started to shift. And as I programmed it to learn those new patterns, I was able to feel calmer. I also used a lot of affirmations, I am safe. I feel safe. And before I even got to that point where I am safe, I said, I am learning to feel safe. Right. And over time, it got easier. And then the periods in which I felt safe became longer and longer and longer. And I just kept building off of that. And now I'm to a point where I can notice in an instant when my energy is off, and then I do a grounding exercise to bring myself back. I can notice because I start to sway, I start to think about the past, I start to think about the future, and then I am able to bring myself back to the present.
Now, I want you to encourage those who are listening to the program who have been through trauma. Maybe they're going through it today or went through them in the past. How critical is it to acknowledge trauma? As we know, everybody's different. Everybody may have different, ways that things manifest themselves, whether in your body or in your surrounding, in your environment. How critical is that to acknowledge that you have had trauma?
Step number 1 is awareness. Without awareness, you really can't do anything. So in order for you to start your healing journey, You have to acknowledge that it happened.
Yes.
And people around you might not validate that, might not believe you, and that's okay,
Yeah.
right?
And that's one of
Knowing
the
inside of
yeah.
you
Yeah.
that happened and acknowledging that and making a decision to heal is what you need to do. And then next, finding people who will acknowledge that with you and validate that and believe that.
And I think it's important to know it's not about what someone's opinion is about, right? It's about how you feel because you're the one that experienced it. I just needed to say that. Now, trauma brings stigma based on society we live in. Would you agree with me? I want you to speak about that.
Absolutely. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, like as, people who have been perpetrated, we are seen as the weak ones. We are seen as the ones to blame. We are seen as the ones who brought it on somehow, by the way we dressed or the way we acted or, we wanted it somehow. So we are the ones who then are given and people shun us for things and shame us and put all of that weight on us as opposed to accepting responsibility for their own behaviors and acknowledging themselves for, abusing others. And hurt people, right? And so they typically, these perpetrators honestly can't, acknowledge that they have hurt others, but that does not mean or give any excuses to hurt anyone else ever.
With you. Yes. You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking with Dr. Asha Beckitt, a public speaker, host of Self-Healing After Sexual Trauma podcast, and author of the upcoming book, Healing Stories, 8 Steps to Reclaim Your Essential Self from Sexual Trauma. She wants everyone to know that abuse does not discriminate and help survivors' healing journeys, as Dr. Asha has a self-heal model that she shared. And today she is also a survivor. She takes a survivor-informed approach grounded in real-life healing journeys of sexual abuse survivors across various aspects of life, including safety, self-assessment, learning, forgiveness, health, empowerment, alignment, and unconditional love. Here to share her story, her experiences, things that help her heal, and we hope that you will be encouraged to get the right help and move forward. Now, Dr. Asha, as we've been talking and you shared your story, now, sharing about your trauma, what is your, what is your take on that your hope for those, I want you to just encourage those who are listening, who are not as bold, and you want them to be as bold, to not stay in the place that they are today.
So first, I want people to understand that there is no excuse for abuse, period. I want people to know that you have the power within you to heal, and that trauma prevents you from accessing yourself and your essential self, and who you are deserves to glow, deserves to shine, deserves to be in this world, deserves to be acknowledged, deserves to be heard, deserves to be seen in every possible way. And trauma does not need to run or ruin your life in any way, sense, or form. And you have every right to be here and to be heard. And so if people are not hearing you and seeing you, then find people, because there are safe people out there who will see you and hear you for exactly who you are and acknowledge you and what has happened to you and honor that.
Now, we don't want to make it seem like this is very easy. I'm sure this was challenging for you. I want you to speak a little bit of how challenging it was, for you, but like you just encouraged others just now. But how challenging was it for you, for those who, to give us an idea, even if we've never been through it, how challenging was it for you?
Yeah, so I'll tell a little bit of my story, which is I was abused by a same-sex pedophile for 4 years. And that started when I was 15. And then it ended when I was 19, when I was finally able to escape it. And because I was residing in the state of Virginia when I called things off,
Right.
in addition to being sexually abused, I also had a lot of money and things like that stolen from me. And it came time for me to pay my tuition, and I was not able to do that. So I tried to pursue some legal ways of doing that. And unfortunately, I was told that because I am a lesbian, that because I'm a lesbian, that I was not allowed, that I would be prosecuted for being a lesbian in Virginia at that time. And so if I decided to press charges, which was outrageous. Right. And so it was extremely difficult for me to come forward. It was extremely difficult for me to tell my story. And what I experienced had nothing to do with me being a lesbian. The fact that it was same sex trauma has nothing to do with my sexual orientation. It was abuse, period. And whether that was same sex or opposite sex, didn't matter. It was abuse. Abuse is abuse is abuse. And so that's what it was really hard for me to come forward to be able to do that, and then to be discriminated against systemically by society on top of that because of my sexual orientation, which had nothing to do with the abuse, made it even harder.
I could only imagine. Now, as we have to wrap up the program today, I just want you to give our listening audience, I know you're writing a book, I know it's not finished yet, but where can our listening audience look to find your book when that time is here?
Yes. So I am writing a book. It's called Healing Stories, 8 Steps to Self-Healing After Sexual Abuse. And please go to www.asherbeckwit.com. It's ASHERBECKWITT.com. And you can pre-order the book, and you can also contact me there and find out more about podcasts and also the Self-Heal program.
Wonderful. Dr. Asha, I am so happy that you had the strength to come on the program and just share your story. I pray you will go forward, and share your story with others that may be in the same place that you are and get the necessary help that they need.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great honor to be here.
Yes. I am Dr. Saran Heron. As you listen in today on Healing from Trauma, it is important to know that everyone's story is never the same. However, it is important to get help, get therapy, and do not ignore trauma. Trauma can affect relationships. Let us normalize having these conversations. Let us be kind and compassionate. But the work starts with the individual. I hope this episode will help those that have suffered trauma, and you will begin to heal and get the necessary help. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Rise, available wherever you listen to podcasts and always right here on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.